UFC 301 Brazil, Alessandro Pantoja versus Steve Erceg is this Saturday, and this is going to be my full card predictions. I'm going to go through every single fight on the card and give you a quick breakdown and prediction. And honestly, I feel like we've been being too hard on UFC 301. I think it's a very solid card throughout, including the prelims. I think it's a vastly underrated UFC card. I know it's not comparable to UFC 300 or 30 or 299 or even 298, but it's still a very salvageable card, and it's much better than UFC 297, which was back in January in Canada. So couldn't have a better main event, of course, but I still think it's a very solid card. Now, before we get into the predictions, this is the first video I've recorded since we hit 20,000 subscribers, so I want to say thank you to each and every one of you. I appreciate you very much. If you're not subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications. I'll be streaming UFC 301 in its entirety from the prelims to the main card. Join me on Saturday to watch the event. Now, starting off with the very first fight of the night, we have Alessandro Costa versus Kevin Borjas in the flyweight division. I like this matchup quite a bit. I honestly think this is a banger for the first fight of the night. It could go either way. It's a very tough fight to pick, but ultimately, I'm going to go Costa. I think Borjas has a striking advantage. He's very slick on the feet. He's coming off that loss against Joshua Van, where he dominated the first round, even hurt Van in the first round. But then he started to fade. He got clipped, I think, in the second round. And then it was kind of downhill from there, and he got out-grappled a bit in the third round. It was a close fight, and I'm high on Joshua Van. Before that, he's coming off of Dana White's Contender Series. Now, Costa is coming off a loss against Steve Erceg, who's now fighting for a title. I think Steve Erceg is a great fighter. We'll talk about him a little bit later in the video. Lost unanimous decision to him. Before that, dominated Jimmy Flick, not the greatest win. Before that, lost to Amir Albazi, got TKO'd, but had a decent performance there and showed decent grappling against a guy who we know how good his grappling is in Albazi. And I just feel like Costa is more well-rounded. I feel like he can mix in the grappling. He took Steve Erceg down maybe once or twice. I know Erceg ultimately reversed the position one time. Costa took him down and got immediately reversed into the full mount. But Borjas is getting held down by Joshua Van. Not that Joshua Van isn't a good fighter, but he's not really known specifically for his grappling. And I think Costa's really big, really strong, has decent enough striking. And while I could see him getting lit up on the feet, I think he's good enough, especially with the threat of the takedown. I think he's going to mix in the takedown. I think he's super powerful in the feet, where Borjas is going to kick your legs and kind of land, lots of jabs and straight punches, but he's not really going to put you out. And I just think basically Costa's a little bit more well-rounded, and I think he'll be able to put it all together. I think it's going to be a scrappy fight. I think it's going to be a close fight. I really truly believe it could go either way. But I also see, Costa in his fights, he throws a lot of body shots. And I think, those body shots could add up on Borjas, who was exhausted in the third round against Joshua Van. I don't trust his cardio all that much. The level of opposition that he's fought hasn't been that great, where Costa, Erceg, and Albazi, Jimmy Flick obviously isn't that great, but still. So I'm going to go Costa. I'm going to say a 29-28 decision win for Alessandro Costa. Moving up on the card, we have Ismael Bonfim versus Vinc Pichel. Vinc Pichel's super tough and durable, but there's no way anyone can justify a pick of Vinc Pichel. He's won 3 out of his last 5, which isn't bad, but he hasn't fought in 2 years. His last fight was against Mark Madsen, where he lost there. Before that, a win over Austin Hubbard, super competitive fight. I believe he got taken down even in that fight. Then a decision loss to Jim Miller. That's 3 years, 8 months ago. Lost to Gregor Gillespie 6 years ago, and that's 5 fights ago. So not very active, old, 41 years old. I don't remember each and every reason why he was out, for long periods of time in between these fights. I'm assuming injuries. 41 going on 42, and meanwhile you have Ismael Bonfim, who I believe got overhyped quite a bit after the win over Terrence McKinney. Absolutely obliterated Terrence McKinney with a flying knee. Since then, lost to Benoit Saint-Denis, but we know how good Benoit Saint-Denis is now. So I look at this matchup, I'm looking at a 28-year-old versus a 41-year-old. You got to go Ismael Bonfim in this matchup. I think Vinc Pichel, very durable, but, everybody eventually sees their chin go. And I think Bonfim, very, very powerful in the feet, has a dynamic, versatile of attacks, flying knees, spinning kicks, nasty kicks in general. And I think Pichel, he just kind of relies on being gritty, a gritty striker. He can't mix in the grappling really all that much. And Bonfim, has really good jiu-jitsu. We haven't really seen him show it in the UFC just yet, but I'm also assuming, considering he trains with Gabriel Bonfim, who has unbelievable submissions in jiu-jitsu. So I just can't pick Vinc Pichel. So I'm going to go Ismael Bonfim to get it done. I know he lost to Benoit Saint-Denis. I don't care. I know he only has one win in the UFC against Terrence McKinney. I think that's a solid win, and he's fighting a guy in Vinc Pichel, whose last fight was 2 years ago against Mark Madsen and lost that fight. So I'm going Ismael Bonfim to get it done. I'm going to pick a first-round KO. I think every, older fighter, eventually they get eaten by the old, and they have that day where they get, finally realize, okay, maybe I shouldn't be doing this anymore. I think this is going to be the day for Vinc Pichel in Brazil at UFC 301. I think Bonfim gets it done via brutal first-round KO. Moving up the card, we have a women's MMA fight. Dione Barbosa versus Ernesta Kareckaite, I think is how you pronounce it, Kareckaite. Something along those lines. Basically, striker versus grappler. Barbosa is looking for submissions, looking for grappling. She won her fight in Dana White's Contender Series via armbar. This is her first fight in the UFC. Before that, in LFA, racking up some wins. Not against the best competition, though. I mean, look at the record of everyone she's fought. 5-1 on Dana White's Contender Series, 5-6 before that, 1-1 before that. Lost to a girl who's 1-0 2.5 years ago. Lost to a girl who's 5-1 4 years ago. And then you have Ernesta. I'm going to call her Ernesta because I can't remember exactly how to pronounce her last name. She's coming off Dana White's Contender Series split decision win against Carly Judas, who really isn't that good, 3-0. And literally has fought super low-level competition as well, 4-0, 0-0. I mean, literally 3 fights ago, she fought a girl who's 0-0. Before that, 2-0 decision. This is grappler versus striker. If Barbosa can get it to the ground, she wins. If Ernesta can keep it standing, she actually really is aggressive. I know a lot of people hate on women's MMA. I think it's just because the level hasn't risen to a skill level that's really aesthetically pleasing for a lot of the women's weight classes, and they're not as deep. But Ernesta really likes to rush forward, throw combinations, and I think ultimately that's going to lead to her getting taken down or in a funky position, or Barbosa's going to pull guard and get a reversal. I don't trust Ernesta's grappling, considering she's primarily a striker and she's 5-0 and has 1 draw. So she has 6 total fights. I think if it gets to the ground, she's going to get out-grappled. So I'm going to go Dione Barbosa. I'm going to say she gets it done via submission. I'm going to say second-round armbar. Whether it's in the clinch, pulling guard, getting a reversal. I believe she got taken down in their fight on Dana White's Contender Series and then found the armbar, if I'm not mistaken. Or maybe found a reversal. It was a belly-down armbar, but I can't remember the exact transition that happened. I watched that yesterday. But I'm going to go Dione Barbosa. I'm going to say she gets it done second-round armbar over Ernesta Kareckaite. Moving up on the card, we have Mauricio Ruffy versus Jamie Mullarkey. Jamie Mullarkey got brutally KO'd in 2 out of his last 3 fights. Nasrat Haqparast absolutely slept him badly in the first round. Got a win over John McDessie, took a lot of damage in that fight. And then before that, got brutally slept by Muhammad Naimov. Jamie Mullarkey is always tough. He's always kind of durable. But I think his chin's starting to go, getting KO'd in 2 out of his last 3 fights. It's not like the most elite of the elite competition. Ruffy, 9-1, coming off of Dana White's Contender Series, had a hard-fought fight there, but literally was fighting till the very end. Got a finish with like 16 seconds to go. As I can't even pronounce the guy's last name, but shot it on a takedown, got reversed, got mounted, and absolutely starched out with like literally 10 seconds to go. Looked good on the feet, has explosive power. Majority of his wins come via finish. I think every single one of his wins is actually via finish. And his only loss was all the way back in 2019. Meanwhile, I feel like Mullarkey, he's only 29 years old. He looks like Eustace from Courage the Cowardly Dog. He's getting slept in his last 2 fights. He primarily likes to strike. He's going to fight exactly where Ruffy wants to fight, on the feet. And I think Ruffy's going to have a speed advantage. I think he has a power advantage. And I think Jamie Mullarkey doesn't move his head enough. In these fights, he's just getting tagged up. I mean, John McDessie was tagging him up. And ultimately, Mullarkey won. But he took a lot of damage in that fight. So his last 3 fights, he's either taking damage and winning in one of them. And then the other 2, he's getting brutally KO'd. I think Mauricio Ruffy goes out there, catches Jamie Mullarkey on the chin, and puts him to sleep. I think Nasrat Haqparast may have been the guy to expose Mullarkey's chin. And now, after that, it's just like he kind of goes on a streak of getting KO'd. He's taken a lot of damage through the course of his career. For 29 years old, it's not very good. Now he's fighting a guy on Dana White's Contender Series who has nasty power, who has good striking. We haven't seen it against the best level of competition, let's be honest. But I haven't looked into it. Last guy he fought was 41-8. That sounds like a bit of a padded record there, so I don't trust that much. 11-6 before that. The guy he lost to was 5 years ago. So, and he's 30 years old, could arguably be going into his prime, looked good on Dana White's Contender Series in all aspects, was able to stuff the takedowns against a guy who was looking to grapple. Mullarkey's not going to look to grapple. This is going to be contested on the feet. I think Mauricio Ruffy goes out there and gets a brutal KO win in the first round over Jamie Mullarkey, catches him with a shot on the feet, puts him down, finishes him off with brutal ground and pound to win the fight in the first round. Moving up on the card, we have Joaquim Silva versus Drakkar Klose. I'm going to be honest, these prelims are good. I'm looking forward to this fight. Joaquim Silva is kind of underrated, honestly. I know that sounds crazy. He's kind of underrated. Coming off a win against Clay Guida, where it was competitive, but he was smashing Clay Guida and stuffing a lot of the takedowns and, beating him up on the feet. Before that, lost to Armin. I know people said Armin got exposed because he clipped Armin, I believe, in the second round. Almost finished him. Bit of an exaggeration, but hurt him badly. So you have that. Before that, Jesse Ronson. Before that, lost to Ricky Glenn. Before that, lost to Nasrat Haqparast. Got finished by Ricky Glenn, got finished by Nasrat, got finished by Armin, took a lot of damage in the Armin fight. Drakkar Klose on a 3-fight winning streak. Joe Selecki in the last fight got taken down. Reverse position, Drakkar Klose, reverse position, ended up on top. Then Selecki was looking for an armbar, slammed him on his head and KO'd him. Before that, win over Rafa Garcia, who's always tough. And before that, a win over Brandon Jenkins, which who really cares about that? And then before that, I lost to Beneil Dariush where he got KO'd, but he hurt Beneil Dariush badly and was looking for a finish, got overzealous and got KO'd. I have to go Drakkar Klose in this fight. Joaquim Silva has good BJJ, but doesn't really use it that much. Doesn't really use his grappling that much. Keeps his hands kind of low. And I think Drakkar Klose, his real weakness is his grappling and his wrestling deficiencies. And he's not even that bad there. He can scramble back to his feet. He doesn't get held down for prolonged periods of time. And meanwhile, Joaquim Silva is going life and death with Clay Guida. That's an exaggeration. He beat Clay Guida up pretty handedly. But it was competitive at some points in time. Clay Guida and the boys were never going to rush the cage at all. So I think Drakkar Klose is going to be cleaner on the feet. I think Drakkar Klose has good enough power where Joaquim Silva has to respect it. And I think Silva just keeps his hands too low. So I see Drakkar Klose going out there and, just going out there and beating him up. And Drakkar Klose has really good cardio as well. He was looking good in the third round against Rafa Garcia where Rafa Garcia was really, really tired. So Joaquim Silva faded a bit in that high output fight against Armin Tsarukyan. He's a guy who has super explosiveness, and then he kind of fades later on. So I'm going to go Drakkar Klose to get it done. I'm going to say he wins it pretty cleanly, 30-27. I think he's crisper on the feet. I think he's more technical on the feet. I think maybe Joaquim has a little bit of a power advantage. But after the first round, I don't think, unless Joaquim Silva hurts him badly and subs him in the first round, or hurts him badly and finishes him off in the first round, I think Drakkar Klose gets it done. I think Drakkar Klose is better on the feet. I don't think Joaquim Silva is going to try to grapple. And Silva's takedowns, offensive wrestling, isn't that good. And Drakkar Klose can scramble back to his feet. When he gets taken down, he got taken down by Joe Selecki, reverses it, ends up on top. The Rafa Garcia fight, he was taken down, was finding his way back to his feet. I don't remember the Brandon Jenkins fight. I didn't watch that recently. But either way, Drakkar Klose has good get-ups from bottom. So Joaquim Silva isn't an amazing offensive wrestler. So I'm going Drakkar Klose. I'm going to say he wins it 30-27 decision. Moving up on the card, we have Jean Silva versus William Gomis. This pissed me off watching back fight footage for this because it reminded me of Gomis' last win, which was a TKO win over Yanis Gamori, where he kicked him in the nuts, I believe for the second or third time in the fight, and the referee called it a TKO. That referee needs to be fired. That referee needs to be disowned by his entire family for fucking up that bad. So that's not a TKO. And honestly, William Gomis, super technical, but he hasn't impressed me at all. I mean, competitive fight with Yanis Gamori, he was clearly winning. Split decision win over Francis Marshall, where he was getting taken down. Before that, a win over Jarno Aarons, which isn't bad. Aarons just had a decent performance. And then before that, he was outside of the UFC. Jean Silva is coming off a win over Weston Wilson, where he brutally KO'd him, but it's Weston Wilson. Let's be clear here. And I think Wilson might have taken on short notice. I can't remember. And then before that, Dana White's Contender Series, where he had a competitive fight on Dana White's Contender Series. I toyed with the idea of picking Jean Silva. He's wild, crazy, powerful on the feet, rushes forward, throws big shots. But I just think William Gomis is too technical for it. And Jean Silva's not going to look to grapple. And Gomis, I'm assuming, has been working on his grappling because that is kind of the hole in his game. And also, Jean Silva, has a 4-inch reach disadvantage in this fight. He's also 5 inches shorter than William Gomis. So I see William Gomis peppering him with kicks from the outside, lighting him up on the feet with straight punches. I see Silva rushing him with big haymakers. Unless he finds a kill shot on the feet, I think he's just going to be outmatched in this fight against William Gomis. So maybe rocks him, hurts him, I don't know, and wins around that way, or maybe he finds a finish. But I think William Gomis is going to pick him apart at range, land good shots with his kicks, land good shots with his hands, and I don't think Silva's going to try to grapple all that much. And I think William Gomis gets it done. I think he's going to piece him up on the feet. I think he's just a more technical fighter. I think he's slicker on the feet. He's longer, he's taller, and I actually kind of like Silva. He's kind of a bit of a weirdo, but William Gomis gets it done via decision, even though I'm not super impressed. Yanis Gamori, Francis Marshall, Jarno Aarons. I'm not super impressed with that resume, but what I've seen so far, it's not like Silva's fighting crazy elite level competition. I mean, Weston Wilson, he needed to KO him early. I mean, a guy off the street could KO Weston Wilson early, but I'm going William Gomis via decision. Moving up on the card, and this is a banger on the prelims. We have Elves Brener versus Myktybek Orolbai. I think is how you pronounce his name. I hope I pronounced it right. This is a savage fight. I absolutely love this fight. Thank you to the UFC for this fight. Prelim, too. Prelim. Banger prelim. Elves Brener. I think he could get this done. I really do think he could get this done. Brutal KO in his last fight. Before that, beat Guram Kutadladze. Before that, a win over Zubari Takugov, but that was a split decision, which honestly I thought he lost. And before that, outside the UFC, that's crazy. I thought Elves Brener was in the UFC longer than that. Then you have Myktybek Orolbai, who went out there and just out-grappled Udos Medic in his last fight on short notice and submitted him with basically a neck crank. It was kind of a rear naked choke. It started to slip under the chin at the end there, but it was like a bulldog choke, but just mauled him in the grappling. But to be honest, he was getting pieced up early. Udos Medic, people forget, was piecing him up early with combinations, landing knees. And then Orolbai just really started to nonstop, relentlessly grapple. And that's when he really started to maul Udos Medic. But also, Orolbai took that on short notice. Elves Brener is so scrappy and so well-rounded. I think he's better on the feet, to be quite honest. And he has good grappling, too. I mean, there was times where he was taking Guram down and beating him up. I know Guram had some top control in that fight and did some damage in that fight as well. But Guram's primarily a kickboxer, and that was just a wild, crazy fight. But overall, I think Orolbai has a much bigger advantage on the ground than Brener probably has on the feet, because I do think Brener definitely has a striking advantage, has nasty leg kicks. I mean, he chews up the lead leg of every fighter he's fought, basically. I mean, Tuhugov, I remember he was chewing up the lead leg of Tuhugov. He was landing good shots against Guram as well, and then his last fight got that nasty KO, slept him face down KO with an overhand left. But I think Orolbai will be able to get some control. I think Brener's going to be scrambling, but I think Orolbai is just so top heavy, can flow with the grappling, is going to have excellent positioning on the ground. And I think Brener is going to have trouble trying to squirm away. I think he's going to think he gets up, and then Orolbai is going to have like a body lock, drag him back to the ground, control him. And I think Brener's going to get tired from this. Orolbai does this all the time. He's a guy who's been grappling for ages. And I think Brener's going to start to get tired. And that's why I'm going to go Myktybek Orolbai. I'm going to say third round TKO. I think by the time the third round comes around, Brener's going to be tired. And I think Orolbai is either going to find a sub or a TKO in the third round. And I'm going to say TKO. Brener has really good jiu-jitsu. Maybe Orolbai finds a sub, but he's not going to get a sub the same way he submitted Udos Medic. I just don't see that happening. So I see Brener just getting worn down from constantly trying to scramble up. I see it being a competitive fight. I see it being a wild fight where it has kind of momentum shifts and Brener gets back to the feet, but then he throws a flying knee and gets taken back down. I think this could be fight of the night, but ultimately I think Myktybek Orolbai gets it done with his grappling, grinding Brener into the canvas, into the cage, getting takedowns, chain wrestling nonstop, and eventually finding a TKO or a submission in the third round. But ultimately, I'm going Myktybek Orolbai, third round TKO. I just think he gets it done. I think the grappling is going to be too much. And I think also, once Orolbai starts having success with the grappling, I think Brener is going to be a little bit more hesitant on the feet. And that's what I think Orolbai gets it done in the third round after Brener really gets exhausted from all the defensive grappling and scrambling nonstop. Moving up on the card, we have Karolina Kowalkiewicz versus Iasmin Lucindo. This is actually a tough fight to pick. Karolina, I feel like, has been counted out time and time again. I feel like I was one of the rare people that picked her against Dione Belbita. I think I picked her against Dione Belbita. She's on a 4-fight winning streak, but before that, she was losing fights left and right to elite level competition. She was fighting really good competition and losing. And then once she kind of got a step down, Felice Herrig, Silva Gomez Juarez, Vanessa Demopoulos, and then Dione Belbita, when she got that step down, she really started to win nonstop. So she's on a 4-fight winning streak. But she's fighting Iasmin Lucindo, who's coming off a win over Polyana Viana, submitted Polyana Viana. I think that's a solid win. Before that, a win over Brogan Walker. Let's be honest, Brogan Walker's a literal trash can. And before that, lost to Iasmin Jauregui. Not a bad loss to have. Jauregui at one point, I was pretty high on her. I'm not confident in this pick by any means, but I'm going to go Iasmin Lucindo. I'm going to say she gets it done via decision. I think Karolina Kowalkiewicz is just getting old, and she's too slow on the feet. She's going to strike. She's not going to try to grapple. Iasmin Lucindo has decent grappling. She has power on the feet. I think Karolina, maybe in her prime, maybe a couple years ago, would win this fight easily, just outstriking her to a decision. But I think Lucindo is going to be much faster. It will make up for some of her technical deficiencies on the feet. I think she'll land more damaging shots. I think occasionally she'll mix in the clinch a little bit. And I think Iasmin Lucindo wins a decision. I think she wins, I'm going to say maybe 29-28 decision win for Iasmin Lucindo. I don't necessarily trust her, but she has some decent grappling. She has some okay submission abilities, and she's 22 years old. Think about that. There's a 16-year youth advantage for Iasmin Lucindo. That's wild. And she has a 2-inch reach advantage, too. I just noticed that. Not that that matters as much, but I think Iasmin Lucindo goes out there, lands the more powerful shots on the feet, mixes in the grappling and clinch work occasionally. And I think Karolina is just going to be too slow on the feet. Her last fight, against Dione Belbita, she looked like she was moving in slow motion. And just the level of opposition she's beaten, even though she's had this career resurgence, it doesn't give me confidence. It's not like Iasmin Lucindo is beating elite level competition. She beat Polyana Viana, which I believe is better than the last 4 wins, probably by Karolina Kowalkiewicz. But ultimately, I'm going Iasmin Lucindo via 29-28 decision. Moving up on the card to the featured prelim, another banger. We have Joanderson Brito versus Jack Shore. This one, I really was torn on. I know gut reaction, Joanderson Brito. But then I started thinking about it. Wait, Brito was losing against Pierce in his last fight, and then he found a ninja choke. Jack Shore, super well-rounded, good on the feet, defensively responsible, good grappling as well. But then I went back and watched Jack Shore's most recent fight because I remember him dominating and finishing Makwan Amirkhani. That really wasn't the case. Makwan out-grappled him in the first round. And honestly, maybe this is crazy to say. If Makwan had a gas tank, maybe he beats Jack Shore. I don't think Jack Shore is built for featherweight. I really think he probably should be down at bantamweight. And I don't think he has that relentless pressure that a guy like Jonathan Pierce has. With nonstop wrestling, nonstop takedowns, I think that's the style to beat a guy like Brito. And if Jonathan Pierce wasn't able to do it, I think Jonathan Pierce is much bigger in overall mass, just size, than Jack Shore. And I think Jack Shore's lost some of that grappling ability going up a weight class. He's kind of, soft for 145. Unless he comes, he's been out for a while. He hasn't fought in a year. Maybe he comes in much more cut up, but I doubt it. Before that, lost to Ricky Simone, got clipped and ended up getting submitted by Ricky Simone via arm triangle. Brito is super powerful on the feet, has amazing jiu-jitsu, is a finisher, whether it's submission or KO. He's finding finishes. 14 out of 16 wins via finish. And I just don't think Jack Shore has the ability to go out there and just nonstop push the pace and grapple. And that is the way you beat Brito. That is the way you beat Brito. Maybe he tries to, fight a game plan where he just picks him apart at range, but Brito is going to close the distance violently and explosively and land. I think he lands. And I think he touches up Jack Shore a bit. So I'm going to go Joanderson Brito. I'm going to pick him. You know what? I'm going to pick him via guillotine. A guillotine, ninja choke, whatever you want to call it. I think he's going to be touching up Jack Shore on the feet. Jack Shore is going to be forced to grapple, which I think he's already going to be grappling, coming in with a heavy grappling game plan. And I think Joanderson Brito has a nasty guillotine, nasty ninja choke that he showed against Jonathan Pierce where he locked it up out of nowhere. And I think he's going to find something similar against Jack Shore, up against the fence, as Jack Shore is looking to chain together takedowns because he's getting beat up on the feet. And I think Joanderson Brito is going to be stronger. I think he's going to be bigger. And I think Jack Shore loses this fight. I could see Jack Shore getting the win, though. I flirted with picking him for a little bit, but then I was like, you know what? what am I going to pick him because he beat Makwan Amirkhani? He was getting taken down by, he got taken down by Makwan Amirkhani, held down in the first round. Second round, Makwan was stuffing takedowns until he got exhausted because he has no cardio, and then eventually kind of wilted. Joanderson Brito didn't even get exhausted against Jonathan Pierce when he was nonstop grappling for, I think, 2 rounds. I think it was second round that he found the choke. It might have even been the third round. I'm not really sure off the top of my head. So I'm going to go Joanderson Brito to get it done in the second round with the guillotine. Up against the fence is Jack Shore shooting in on a desperation takedown because he gets clipped on the feet hard by Brito and his explosive power. Brito gets it done. Moving up on the card, the first fight on the main card, Paul Craig versus Caio Borralho. And our first dead body on the main card is Paul Craig. Is anyone going to be picking Paul Craig? Let me actually look on Tapology. 12% is picking Paul Craig. The only way I see Paul Craig getting a win here is if Caio Borralho doesn't really be super careful on the ground. And I don't see that happening, especially considering Caio Borralho has really good jiu-jitsu himself. We've seen Brendan Allen go down on top of Paul Craig and beat him up and eventually find a submission of his own. I just think early, Caio Borralho early in that first round can't be super careless because Paul Craig just finds a way to get submissions. He has a sub win over Magomed Ankalaev. He has a sub win over Jamal Hill. Now, granted, that was a while ago because he's lost 3 out of his last 4. He lost to Brendan Allen, has a win over Andre Muniz, who's an absolute scrub in my opinion. Got KO'd by Johnny Walker, lost the decision to Volkan Ozdemir. Has a win over Nikita Krylov via triangle choke 2 years ago. But at this point, I think Paul Craig at 36 years old is basically a dead body who's just going to spam takedowns. You know, he was on a single leg on Johnny Walker, refused to let go, and got KO'd because of it. It was absolutely a meme KO. I think Caio Borralho is improving on the feet, has really good takedown defense, has really good offensive wrestling as well, and has nasty kicks on the feet as well. And Paul Craig has no striking at all. I mean, Paul Craig is like Ben Askren on the feet. He's like Ben Askren on the feet. That's how bad Paul Craig's striking is. And maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration, but Borralho's improving. I mean, he was doing well against Abus Magomedov on the feet. I think Abus has really good striking on the feet. Obviously, Abus doesn't have good cardio at all. So, you know, as the fight went on, Caio Borralho started to pull, you know, out ahead. But before that, a submission win over Mikhail Olszewczak. Before that, a win over Makhmed Muradov where he outgrappled him. Before that, a win over Armin Petrosian, which I think is an underrated win. Petrosian's actually really good. And, you know, I understand the matchup's a little bit weird. Maybe Caio starts offensively wrestling and gets submitted on the ground in the first round because Paul Craig's just such a crafty guy on the ground. But ultimately, what I see this fight going down, I think Borralho is very smart. I think he realizes, look, I'm on the verge of kind of maybe ending up in that top 10 of the middleweight division. I'm going to fight this very safe. I think he's going to stuff the takedowns from Paul Craig. I think he's going to avoid the ground until he absolutely is sure he's going to be all right on the ground because he's going to have hurt Paul Craig badly. And I think he's going to smoke Paul Craig. I know Borralho is a bit of a decision guy, but I think Paul Craig's chin is gone, and I think his striking is absolutely atrocious. And I see Borralho touching him up on the feet badly. He has nasty kicks. I'm going to go Caio Borralho, first round TKO. I'm going to say early he's a little bit tentative, stuffing the takedowns of Paul Craig, making sure Paul Craig doesn't pull any funny business, looking like a pool guard or whatever. And I think as Borralho starts to get a little bit more confident, he's going to start touching him up with the striking. Eventually find, I'm going to say a nasty head kick. I'm going to be a little bit more specific with this prediction. Nasty head kick, drops Paul Craig. Paul Craig's basically already done, similar to when Jamal Hill got KO'd by Alex Pereira. And then he's going to follow him to the ground and finish him off with nasty ground and pound because at this point he's going to be like, okay, I got to get the finish here. Paul Craig isn't a threat because he's hurt so badly, even though he might still be. I don't think Caio Borralho is going to go out there and try to offensively grapple nonstop against a guy like Paul Craig who has slick submissions off of his back. I don't think he's going to do that. I'm going Caio Borralho via first round KO. May end up being a second round KO, but I think Caio Borralho definitely finishes Paul Craig. I'd be shocked if he ended up going to a decision with Paul Craig. Moving up on the card, we have Michel Pereira versus Ihor Potieria. Ihor Potieria stepping in on short notice. I forgot who was supposed to fight Michel Pereira off the top of my head. But either way, it's not crazy short notice. I believe it was like 3 or 4 weeks notice. Michel Pereira at middleweight has looked like an absolute savage. The striking has looked really good. He still looks big for middleweight. No wonder Wonderboy Thompson didn't want to fight him when he missed weight. Coming off a win over Mikhail Olszewczak, submitted him after hurting him. Before that, destroyed Andrei Petrovsky. Before that, split decision over Santiago Ponzinibbio back at welterweight. And that's the kind of the gist of his good wins. But's looked really, really good at middleweight. And then Ihor Potieria, win over Robert Brechek in his last fight. It was competitive, but, it was an okay win for him. Before that, got destroyed by Rodolfo Bellato, but actually was winning early and then gassed himself out looking for a finish. So even though he got finished badly, it was because he emptied the tank looking for a finish himself. And before that, got smoked by Carlos Ulberg. I just don't think Potieria is great anywhere. He's decent everywhere. He has okay grappling. I think he's going to try to grapple in this fight. Has decent striking, but not great. Has okay power, but not great. I think Michel Pereira at middleweight has good takedown defense. I think he's bigger. I think he's stronger. He's not drained from the weight cut anymore. His striking is vicious. His diversity of attack is, leaves his opponent kind of playing a guessing game a bit. And I just think he's much better than Potieria. Everything's going against Potieria. Short notice, even though, it's not crazy short notice. He didn't have a full camp for this fight. And he's fighting a guy in Pereira who just has nasty striking, nasty kicks, good movement, looks better than ever at middleweight. I'm going to go Michel Pereira. I'm going to say second round TKO. I think he gets it done, catches him on the feet, hurts him badly, gets another impressive win, and Michel Pereira starts looking like a legit contender at 185 pounds. I just can't imagine a world where Ihor Potieria goes out there and just saps Michel Pereira's with grappling and saps his stamina and beats him up on the ground and finds a gritty decision win. I just don't see that. Potieria is what's his best win? I don't even know. I don't even know if he has the best win. I mean, he memed KO'd Mauricio Shogun Rua and started Fortnite dancing on him, which was an embarrassment. And I think the MMA gods are going to get their retribution for that, or may have already got their retribution for that. But ultimately, I'm going Michel Pereira. He's going to get it done with his striking. I'm going second round TKO, catches him on the feet, and finishes him on the ground. Moving up on the card, the second dead body on the main card, we have Anthony Lionheart Smith versus Vitor Petrino. I told you guys, in MMA, the young perpetually eat the old. And we have Anthony Smith, who's only 35 years old, but he might as well be 50 years old in MMA years because he's 37-19 overall record. Then you have Vitor Petrino, 11-0, undefeated. Hasn't fought the best competition, but this is a good step up for him. I think Anthony Smith's a dead body. I can't pick Anthony Smith. Now, he may come out and pull it off. He may show up as Anthony on paper Smith. But his last fight got brutalized by Khalil Roundtree. Had him doing the spinneroonie mid-fight. Before that, split decision over Ryan Spann, which I thought he lost, and Ryan Spann's garbage. Before that, lost to Johnny Walker. Before that, stoppage loss against Magomed Ankalaev. I know Anthony Smith has been finished a bit, but honestly, when I was looking back at his resume, the finished losses in the last few years haven't actually been that bad. Khalil Roundtree, Magomed Ankalaev, Glover Teixeira. So when I'm looking at that, and I'm looking at Vitor Petrino, who seems like he prioritizes winning over a finish, which I know most fighters should, but there's some guys who just go out there and look to make a statement and want to get a bonus. He's going to decision with Tyson Pedro, out-grappling, out-striking Tyson Pedro. Before that, KO'd Modestas Bukauskas, fair enough. Before that, submitted Marcin Prachnio, but it looked like that fight was going to a decision, but then found like a third-round sub. I don't know if he goes out there and finishes Anthony Smith. Anthony Smith is durable, is gritty, tries to survive at all costs, and he's getting finished by the elite of the elite. Magomed Ankalaev, Glover Teixeira at the time, and who else was it? Khalil Roundtree Jr., where he did the spinneroonie mid-fight. So I'm going to go Vitor Petrino via decision. I think Vitor Petrino beats him up on the feet a bit. I think has a massive power advantage on the feet. I think Anthony Smith's just getting old and slow. I don't even think he's that bad. I just think he's old, slow, probably suffering from a little bit of brain damage as well because he's had so many fights. I mean, 19 losses. Been TKO'd, I think 10 TKO'd or KO'd 10 times. I could see Petrino getting a finish here. I bet you a lot of people are going to pick Petrino via KO. But I'm going to say Anthony Smith gets out there and puts on a bit of an inspired performance, but ultimately loses a decision win to Vitor Petrino in a fight that maybe Anthony Smith should retire after. Because, okay, he put up a decent showing, maybe had a couple moments, landed a couple big shots. But ultimately, what's he going to do? Out-grapple Petrino? What's he going to do? Take down Petrino and hold him down? I don't think so. He's not going to outstrike him, I don't think. Petrino, a little bit of a reach advantage. Anthony Smith, height advantage. But 26 to 35 years old. Massive 9-year youth advantage for Vitor Petrino. 11-0, has taken very limited damage. So I'm going to go Vitor Petrino to get it done via decision. I think he dominates Anthony Smith, wins a 30-27 decision. Maybe Anthony Smith has a couple, odd moments throughout the fight, where he lands a couple decent shots. But ultimately, I think Petrino just beats him everywhere. Moving up on the card to the co-main event, we have Jonathan Martinez versus Jose Aldo. This is a very tricky co-main event to predict here. And I've debated it back and forth. And I'm honestly still kind of undecided. I know who I'm leaning towards and ultimately who I'm probably going to go with. But this is a banger matchup. But I don't know where Jose Aldo's at. Jose Aldo hasn't fought in MMA in damn near 2 years. Okay? And you look back at his resume. So he lost to Merab Dvalishvili in his last fight. No shame in that. Absolutely no shame in that. Got out-grappled. Before that, a win over Rob Font. Unanimous decision win over Rob Font. Before that, a unanimous decision win over Pedro Munoz. Before that, a unanimous decision win over Marlon Vera. Jose Aldo, former featherweight champion, moved down later in his career to 135 and still had success at an elite level. Before that, a loss to Piotr Jan. Got destroyed by Piotr Jan in a very competitive fight early, but Jan started to pull out ahead later in the fight. I'm looking at Jose Aldo. I'm seeing a 37-year-old bantamweight. I'm seeing a guy who had 3 quality wins at bantamweight, but it's not 2020 anymore. It's not 2021 anymore. And you look at those 3 wins. I know it sounds like I'm picking apart Aldo's resume. It's not what I'm doing. This is a tough fight to pick. And so I'm trying to really justify in my head who I'm going with, which I'm probably going with Jonathan Martinez here. I'm debating about what method I'm picking him by. But the point I'm getting to is Rob Font win hasn't aged that well. Rob Font on a skid. Pedro Munoz on a skid. Marlon Vera really, honestly, was never really that good. All of them are quality wins, don't get me wrong. But it's not like he was blowing these top-tier guys out at 35, 34, and he's been inactive for 2 years. I know he's been boxing and whatnot, but that's not the same as MMA. And Jonathan Martinez, he doesn't have the greatest resume, but he's fighting really good competition. Adrian Yanez, Said Nurmagomedov, which actually I thought he lost, destroyed Cub Swanson. And, that's pretty much his best wins right there. 19-4, long win streak, 30 years old, and has some of the nastiest kicks in the game. And I know Aldo does as well, but he doesn't really throw a whole lot of leg kicks. So ultimately, I'm going to go Jonathan Martinez. Younger, active, been around, hasn't been off, boxing Jeremy Stevens into a draw. And I just think 37 years old at bantamweight, it's tough to make that pick. And it's a bit of an unknown. Considering his last win in MMA 2 years and 4 months ago against Rob Font. And I'm just looking at those wins, and even in my mind, I'm going back in time, and I'm thinking, how good did I think Rob Font was then? How good did I think Pedro Munoz was then? How good did I think Marlon Vera was then? I'm thinking, those versions of those fighters, I'm picking Jonathan Martinez against. So I'm going to see Jonathan Martinez get it done. I'm going to say via decision. I'm going to say he out-leg kicks Jose Aldo as a passing of the guard. Also, I seen a recent article, and I didn't dig deep into it, but Jose Aldo appears to be just returning to fight out his UFC contract. So probably he can go do like celebrity boxing or whatever. That's what I'm guessing. I don't know for sure. So I don't think his head's completely in it. I think Jonathan Martinez gets it done. I think he outstrikes him. I think it's a competitive fight. I'm going to say 29-28 Jonathan Martinez via decision in the co-main event at UFC 301. And by the way, Jose Aldo is one of my favorite fighters of all time. I can't believe that I'm picking him to lose. I picked him to win against Merab. But it's been 2 years. He's been inactive in MMA. I think ring rust is real, especially when you're 37 years old at the bantamweight weight class. So I'm going Jonathan Martinez to get it done via decision. Moving up on the card to the main event, Alessandro Pantoja versus Steve Erceg. I manifested this. I said after Steve Erceg's last fight, give him a title shot. I want to see him in a title shot. People laughed at me. I said, let's campaign for Steve Erceg to get a title shot. And he got his title shot at UFC 301. And, I was really strongly considering picking Steve Erceg, and I still kind of am. I just don't know if I can justify it with the level of opposition that he's fought. He's, 3 fights in the UFC. He beat David Dvorak on short notice via decision. Beat Alessandro Costa, who's fighting on this card as well. Beat him via decision. And then KO'd Matt Schnell. The wins, Steve Erceg looked real clean in all 3 of those wins. Hurt David Dvorak, I think, with like a head kick in the second or third round. Alessandro Costa, I think is really solid, all the way around and outbeat him, but was taken down by Costa a couple times. He reversed out of the position and ended up on top or got back to his feet. And then the Matt Schnell fight, clean, nasty left hook KO. But this is a big jump up in competition against Alessandro Pantoja. I almost said Costa there. Coming off a win over Brandon Royval, super scrappy, good striking. Before that, a win over Brandon Moreno. I thought he lost, but it was a very razor-close fight. Could have went either way. Before that, a win over Alex Perez, which honestly has aged even better after the win by Perez recently over Nicolau. Before that, a submission win over Brandon Royval. I mean, he's fought the who's who of the flyweight division. Win over Manel Kopp. Pantoja goes out there and creates chaos on the feet to create back exposure, to snatch up your back and control you and beat you up and look for a submission. And I know Steve Erceg has really good grappling. He's slick, has nasty BJJ. I feel like that's his primary strength. He's used his grappling to win a lot of fights. I don't think it's on the level of Pantoja. I really don't. If Erceg can go out there and stuff the takedowns and avoid fighting in one of these chaotic fights, I think Erceg can go out there and win. I would pick Erceg via decision or maybe like a late KO. And I really flirted. And up until tonight when I was watching some fight footage, I was picking Steve Erceg. I changed my pick after watching some fight footage, which is usually a curse. But the evidence I don't think's there. I just don't think it's there. The level of opposition, I think you can pick these guys who are coming up, they fight, they look good against kind of lower level opposition, and then all of a sudden they fight elite level competition and they prove themselves. This could happen at UFC 301 for Erceg. But I just think Pantoja has a granite chin. He walks you down, throwing wild winging shots, has nasty power. He creates scrambles, and he finds your back. And even if he can't submit Erceg, I think he'll get some control time. Royval is one of the scrappiest and squirmiest guys on the ground. And Pantoja was controlling him, and apparently he had the flu going into that fight. And that's the first time recently we've seen bad cardio from Pantoja. Earlier in his career, I didn't really trust his cardio, but we've seen it look really good against Brandon Moreno. I just think this is going to be a fight where it's a little bit too much too soon for Steve Erceg. And I think Pantoja absorbs damage on the feet. I think Erceg will have some moments. I think this fight will be very, very competitive early. But I think ultimately Pantoja is going to get some back control, going to get a body lock. And I think Erceg's going to get controlled. And I think Pantoja is going to be looking for a rear naked choke. And maybe he doesn't find it in the first round. Maybe he doesn't even get there in the first round. But as the fight goes on, I think Erceg's going to accept the bad grappling positions and the top control from Pantoja more and more. And that's why I'm going to go Alessandro Pantoja. I'm going to say third round submission. I'm going to say he gets it done via third round rear naked choke. I'm not super confident in that method, but I think Pantoja either gets it done via submission or via decision and just has a lot of control time, similar to what he had against Brandon Royval in his last fight, which really impressed me considering that he was sick. Royval had some moments in that fight, and I do think Erceg has more power than Royval. I think Royval it was like he was throwing like half power in that fight. I think he could have had more success, but I think this is going to be a Pantoja who's ready for Erceg. He's not underestimating him. He's in Brazil. He's ready to go and put on a show for his home crowd. And I just think Steve Erceg, maybe he's getting that title shot a little bit too soon. I remember being very high on Kyoji Horiguchi years ago. And because of the division, he was propelled to a title shot a little bit too soon. And he ended up losing to Demetrius Mighty Mouse Johnson. I think that could be one of these scenarios for Steve Erceg. Pantoja still arguably in his prime, most definitely in his prime. He's 34, so he's not, that 35, 36, when you start to get up to that age, that's when I really start to think, okay, is age going to be a factor here? I think Pantoja still has a couple more title defenses in him potentially, depending on who he's fighting. I picked against him in his last two. Picked against him against Royval, and I picked against him against Moreno. But I just don't see Steve Erceg stuffing every takedown, avoiding a chaotic fight, and getting a finish on the feet. And I don't see him just outstriking Pantoja for 5 rounds and winning. I think Erceg has the better striking, but Pantoja, granite chin, nasty power coming back, and will always look to create that chaos to find a takedown and get some control time. Once he gets a hold of you, it's almost impossible to get away from him. So I'm going Pantoja to get it done. It would be crazy if Erceg wins. It would not shock me if Erceg wins. I'm high on Steve Erceg, but I think Pantoja gets it done. I'm picking him to win. Third round, rear naked choke after controlling Erceg for like the second round. And the first round is going to be super competitive. And I think it's going to be one of those fights where Pantoja and Erceg are kind of going, you know, are super competitive with each other, and then you see the tide and the momentum start to really go in Pantoja's direction as he gets a takedown, he gets a body lock, and controls Erceg, but he doesn't maybe do a whole lot of damage, and then Erceg's a little bit more tired the next round, and a little bit more worried about the grappling because he couldn't get out of the position once he got controlled, and then that's when it's all going to start going downhill for Pantoja, or going uphill for Pantoja, downhill for Erceg. And I think Pantoja finds a late third round rear naked choke. Ultimately for me, it's the level of opposition. Pantoja's fought the who's who of elite flyweights. Erceg hasn't yet. I'm going Alessandro Pantoja to win in the main event of UFC 301. Rear naked choke in the third round. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.